Well, no giggles, please. I'm an old man, so I can wear glasses like this. In my convoluted state this morning, I forgot, Jerry, your glasses are better than these. Here, trade, yeah. These are my backup to the backup, so in case something like today happens, because I'm blind as a bat without glasses. Anyway, just kind of a preview. We're going to, you could preach Genesis for over a year at least, but we're going to move on. We're going to wrap it up with talking about the flood, and then next week we're going to, and I'll tell you this about that. I've read the book, and I've seen some really cheesy animation of Pilgrim's Progress. In fact, I quit watching a couple of them because they were just cheesy. This is well done. This is well done, and this has an incredible evangelistic message that child, adult, anybody can understand. And it's well done, isn't it, Ed? So, he watched it on computer. We got a, what do you call it? We got something to where code or something. But anyway, it's worth the time. So make note of the fact that next week we're going to have kind of a different schedule. We're not going to have Sunday school per se. We're going to start up here at 10 o'clock so we don't go into the afternoon too late. But plan on coming to that. It's going to be worth your time. Like I said, it really covers the progress of us as believers. And the things that we go through, and it's just, well, I don't want to be redundant, but it's well done. So plan on that next week, and then the next week, we're going to have we're going to start our new series, if you will, talking about church. Talking about church and the various aspects of how we incorporate in what is the church. It's not this building, it's us. Now, I just want to let you know, I am going to have a couple extra pews installed in the back so you can move back further. I cracked myself up. No, whatever. Anyway, there's just certain aspects. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it'll speak to me, and I hope as it speaks to me, the Lord will use me to speak to all of us. Okay, Genesis 9, 8 through 17 is what we're going to be looking at today. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant, which is an agreement, my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I've set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I've established between me and all life on the earth. Now that seems a little repetitive, doesn't it? It does. But if you've ever written a legal covenant, what did I say? If you've ever read a legal covenant, they seem to be that way. You know, they're real wordy. And I'm not saying that God is, but he's saying, I want you to get this. And so, you know, if it's repetitive, it's for a purpose. I want you to understand what this is about. And this is so cool. A covenant wrapped in a rainbow. I like that. You know, rainbows are considered beautiful, and they catch the eyes of the young and the old. You know, you'll see it, and you know, my grandkids will be like, wow, there's a rainbow. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you see a double rainbow. I've seen double rainbows, but I've lived long, and I see those kind of things. Sometimes they're not really there, but I see them. Oh, gosh, what a day. I shouldn't say that, because this is a good day. This is a day to be in the house of the Lord and allow him to speak. 7 colors make up a rainbow. Now, there will be a test on this, so you know, make a mental note. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Scientifically, a rainbow is an arc of concentric bands that develops when sunlight. I really didn't get this all the way until I read, about this, but concentric bands that develop when sunlight interacts with raindrops. And you have to have that to have a rainbow. You don't get a rainbow, on a clear day. But I happen to believe, and I'm an easy mark, but I happen to believe that there's a bunch of the little Irish leprechauns with a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's just me. You may not buy into it, but I speak truth. I don't speak with forked tongue. These leprechauns will grant you everything you could ever hope for, want, or wish. All that's required is getting to the end of the rainbow, which you can. The law of physics makes it impossible to walk under a rainbow. I didn't know that. That's why if you see me outside and it's kind of, I'm not walking back and forth, I'm trying to get under that rascal, but it doesn't work. Physics says no. The same law makes it impossible to find the end of the rainbow. So as the proverbial saying goes, don't quit your day job because you're not going to find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Beyond myths, we're curious as to the meaning in a rainbow. What's its significance? This is an opportunity, an easy opportunity, to evangelize when, you can move into, hey, there's a rainbow. What's the meaning of a rainbow and why is it significant? There must be a purpose, and there is. But it can give us an opportunity to witness to someone about, well, let me tell you about that since you asked. This is a covenant that God made with Noah's family and future generations, which includes us. The rainbow is the only thing you'll see in the sky that's a sign with a spiritual message. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you. And we read that passage. The flood's over. And Noah comes out of the ark, and he comes into a new world created by the flood. Can you imagine this? I mean, the earth was this way, antediluvian, which means pre-flood. I can't spell it, but I can say it. But post-diluvian, okay, smarty pants, you spell it. But to come out of the ark, and he knew what the earth was like, but the whole earth was covered with water. I can't remember when we had floods like in 93 in farm fields and stuff. I read somewhere about how much pressure, just on that amount of water, how much pressure is exerted on the earth with that water standing. It was incredible. But this is way, way more than that. This is clear up over the highest mountains on the earth at that time. And then Noah comes out and wow, it's a brand new world. Not what he is accustomed to. The flood devastated and changed the earth in the aftermath. You know, this is something I never really thought a whole lot about, but death was everywhere. I mean, all living humanity and all living creatures died during the flood. So when the water goes away, there's death everywhere, which is also kind of a reminder in itself of this was God's purpose, that man had gone so astray from what God's intent was for humanity that this was the result. But it drowned all humanity and all the animals save the 8 people and the animals on the ark. In the first 7 verses in chapter 9, Noah and his family are told what they're to do. God gives them instructions. Now, this is what you are to do. They were to reproduce. They were to rule. They were to eat. And they were to execute those who took life. Basically, your capital punishment. Now in verses 8 through 17, God says what he's going to do. He's told man, this is what you're going to do. Now, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a covenant with you, a promise made by God to man. He makes it with Noah's family, which constitutes all of humanity. So really, it's a covenant that he gives to all mankind. So when we look up and we see that, we know that that was a covenant for them, but it's a covenant for now. It's a covenant for all of humanity, all generations in that. His promise is, I'll never do what I just did again with water. God initiates, enacts, and completes the covenant. Prior to the flood, it didn't rain. You know, so when Noah's going around, well, it's going to rain, and the oceans of the deep, the pressure is going to be released, and all the water is going to come up, and this is what's going to happen. And, you know, they're like, yeah. They don't get it. They will get it, but they don't get it. May I just break away for a minute? And that tends to go on today. People can be warned. They all want a ooey gooey loving God, which He is, but they don't want to attribute God's wrath to Him. And we would be remiss if we didn't say that God's wrath is against sin. He doesn't accept it. He doesn't brush it off. He doesn't just go, oh, well. There's no oh, well about it. But we're in a time where God gives us a period of grace to accept Him, or we're going to suffer the consequences. But now it'll be common to have rain regularly. Now, can you just think about the first time that raindrops started hitting Noah? He's like, honey, grab the kids, let's go to the ark. You know, is the same thing going to happen again? No, because God said, I'll never destroy the earth by water again. But like I said, now it's rain as regularly occurs. It happened yesterday. Whew, rained hard. God moves the water. There's always logic to the scientific method of what God does. God moves the water in the hydrological cycle. It's evaporated up out of the ocean, goes into the clouds, carried across the land, deposited on the land, runs into the streams, runs into rivers, runs back to the sea, and that's the hydrological cycle. Although water is necessary to maintain life, like I said, at that time, Noah's response was probably like, I don't like rain. Not a fan. God's faithful. This is key. So if you don't hear anything else, get this. God is faithful. Linked to the fact that God has kept his covenants. When God says this and this I will do, you better believe it. Because that's true. He's made a vow that will happen. Proof being he's never violated the vow he made. You know, if we look at it in human terms, we see it different. We see humanity's kind of askew in this thing. Husbands and wives make vows in marriage, don't they? They stand here or stand wherever they stand, and they stand, you know, and it's I'm making these vows before people and who? God. I'm making this vow before people and God. I'm making a promise. They're making a covenant, if you will, an agreement between themselves. But unfortunately, one or the other violates the promise too frequently. But God doesn't. God is faithful to do what he says he'll do. And I like that. Man's not, but God is. God's promise perpetual to all generations, including today. As long as the earth remains. Isaiah 54:9 says, "For this is like the days of Noah to me, when I swore that the waters of Noah should not flood the earth again." God says, I won't do it again. Not that you don't deserve it, but I said I wouldn't, so I won't. And the rainbow is a token of his promise, never to destroy the world again by flood until the end of human history, when the whole universe will be destroyed by fire, as described in, we're not going to read it, but you can read it if you want, in 2 Peter, the 3rd chapter. But if we understand this in the sense in which it was given, the whole flood story is a revelation of God's holy wrath. But the rainbow is a sign to all humanity that God, if you want graciousness, if you want mercy, the rainbow is a sign to all humanity that God is gracious and merciful to sinners. He doesn't accept our sinfulness. That's not in his plan, but for now, he's gracious and shows mercy to all, to sinners. And don't take that the wrong way. I know this will surprise and astound you, but at one time I was a sinner separated from God. That's a fact. So I know what that's like. Oh, guess what? Everybody in this room knows what that's like. Righteousness isn't from ourselves. Righteousness only comes from the Lord. He is our righteousness. But the thing about it is, once we receive His Son, it's the desire of our heart to please Him, to follow Him, to walk after Him. I had my time of living my own way, and most times that didn't work out so well. And in the end, if I'd have been left to those devices, it wouldn't have worked out at all. But today, I can stand before the judge, and he said, there's a penalty against you, Jim. And Jesus says, he stands up, and he says, but he's mine, and I've paid his price that he could have never paid. And I dig that. I get in my own little pea brain, I get the visual of Christ standing up and said, he belongs to me. And the Father accepts that, because that was the plan all along, that through Jesus we would find acceptance before the Father. You know, you can't have it both ways. You can't have, and I was reading a deal the other day, and they said, you know what, preachers just don't talk about hell enough. And I guess that's probably true. I remember the one deal I read where a preacher, though, went off on talking about hell and everything else, and one of the leaders in the church came up to him after the sermon and said, you know what, I agree with what you're preaching, but he said, I just think you enjoy it too much. You know what I'm saying? We don't enjoy it too much, but it's there. And we are remiss if we don't. You know, the world would like to say, the Oprah world would like to say, yeah, get to heaven any way you want to. Take whatever path you want to. Well, that's man's way. But God said there's only one way. And if you say, well, that's kind of restrictive. Well, that ain't my rule. That's His rule. And it isn't just come any old way you want to. And, you know, if you want to look at it in a way, God's wrath is simmering. God is holding His wrath back against the sin of mankind. But the day will come when payment will be due and payment will be made. But again, if you want a positive, the positive thing is God said, but I don't want you to go there. You know, remember what I said, hell wasn't created for man. Who was it created for? Satan and the demons. But men choose, men being gender friendly, choose that's the path we want. We don't want this God thing. That's where we want, because that's where we have latitude to do whatever we feel like. I've shared this with you before, and I'm probably repeating myself. Well, I know I am, but it plays here, and this isn't a made-up story. A friend of mine in seminary, his ministry was going to prisons and talking to the inmates and stuff. And so he goes, and he'd been talking to this guy for weeks, and he really felt like the Spirit was getting close to bringing him in a knowledge and acceptance of Jesus Christ. And he goes, my friend asked this guy, he goes, well, what's holding you back? What's holding you back from accepting Christ? And he goes, well, I just want to be able to do my own thing and be my own boss. And my friend's like, look around. This is what got you where you are. You got to do your own thing. And now you're in prison. The guy still didn't really get it. But that's there's always a consequence for us doing our own thing and feeling like, we got to have our freedom. But I tell you this, and then I'll be quiet. My greatest freedom is in Jesus Christ. That's freedom. I don't live under the bondage of sin. Do I sin? Sure, I do. I'm not saying I don't. But what did I just say? Freedom is in Christ. I live in that. Till my dying day, until I go to be with Him, I live in the freedom that without Christ, you don't know freedom. And that's a fact. You don't know freedom until you have the freedom to live in Him. Now I'll be quiet. As we sing,